On our third anniversary, I cooked a full French dinner, but my husband never showed up. When I called, his mistress picked up and said, "Who are you? He's asleep, call back tomorrow." So I cleared out the entire house and walked away. He collapsed the moment he saw the signed divorce papers. Grace here. I still feel the phantom ache in my chest when I think about that night, the night my carefully constructed world finally crumbled into 1,000 pieces, revealing the chilling truth of a betrayal so deep, it still haunts my quiet moments. It was our third wedding anniversary, and I stood there, shivering at the cinema entrance, watching the clock hand tick past 7. Samuel was late, half an hour late, and that familiar, icy dread was already curling in my stomach. I just knew he was with Alice again. Defeated, I walked home, the memory of the candlelit dinner, and the wine I'd so lovingly prepared for us twisting like a knife in my gut. My heart wasn't just sinking anymore, it was shattered. I drank that wine alone, glass after glass, desperate to dull the pain, to numb the reality of it all. Late into the night, the alcohol made me brave enough to dial his number. But it wasn't Samuel who answered. No. Instead, a sweet, syrupy voice purred into my ear. "Who is this?" "Samuel is asleep. Call back tomorrow." My breath hitched. It was Alice. His secretary. The alcohol hit me harder then, a dizzying wave, but it couldn't drown out the cruel, undeniable truth. I spent the rest of that night staring at the ceiling, my eyes wide open, watching the dark give way to a cold, unforgiving dawn. The next day, Samuel called, his voice rough with sleep. "Grace, you called last night. Don't overthink it. It was just a last-minute friends gathering, I drank too much. I stayed over at Alice's place, but I slept on the couch. Nothing happened." My stomach churned. I didn't respond. Couldn't. I just hung up. We didn't speak for a week. He didn't come home. Then, one morning, a bouquet of bright roses landed on my desk at the office. I just stared at them, a bitter scoff rising in my throat, and dumped them straight into the trash. Samuel always did this. When I was upset, he'd give me the silent treatment, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to apologize. Then, when a week passed and he still didn't get what he wanted, the roses would arrive, a peace offering, signaling he was ready to forgive me. And like a fool, for 3 long years I always did. I always caved, always forgave him, no matter what he'd done, all because of a stupid bouquet of flowers. I had been his puppet, letting him manipulate me, letting him strip away my dignity, piece by agonizing piece. I used to wonder why I never thought of leaving. Now I know. I was so tangled up in my feelings, I didn't even recognize how little I valued myself. But that day, seeing those roses, something shifted. I was tired. They stirred nothing in me. Absolutely nothing. That evening, as I was wrapping up work, Samuel suddenly appeared at my office entrance. He had never picked me up in 3 years. Never. This was a first. I walked over calm, almost detached. "What's the matter?" My tone must have been colder than I intended because Samuel looked genuinely taken aback, a little awkward. He scratched his head, trying to mask his discomfort. "Last week was our anniversary. We had planned a movie and a candlelight dinner. I'll make it up to you tonight." A cold, brittle smile touched my lips. "Anniversary? You missed it, and now you want to make up for it?" "No need," I said flatly. "I don't think it matters that much. Also, the ride I booked is here." Without another word I turned, got into the car, and left him standing there, his hands stuffed in his pockets, looking, well, lonely. For the first time, I didn't care. The next day, the light was on in the general manager's office. It had been dark for 2 months since the last one left. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked over, peeked in, and my heart slammed against my ribs. Samuel. He was sitting there, focused on his computer, then looked up at me. "Good morning." I couldn't hide my shock. He worked at headquarters, I was at a branch. He was the new GM? I quickly glanced at the partition outside his office. And sure enough, there was a new desk. He brought Alice with him. How wonderful. He wasn't just here to keep an eye on me. He brought his mistress too. I managed a neutral "Good morning," and hurried to my desk. As I walked through the open office, I heard the whispers. "Hey, did you see the new general manager? It's Samuel, the star from headquarters. The VP from operations. He's so handsome." Then the sting. I heard his secretary, that rumored lover Alice, came along too. He's got it all. Career and beauty. Envy-worthy. A co-worker added. I heard Samuel's married. The rumors say it's with someone from our company. I think it's Grace, our branch's operations director. As soon as they saw me, the chatter died. I sat down, the noise in my head louder than their silence. A while later, Alice, with her impossibly graceful steps, came over. Mrs. Brooks, Mr. Brooks asked you to come to his office. I nodded, followed her. When we entered, Samuel stood up, closing the door behind us. I looked at him, my gaze unwavering. Just tell me if you need something. He hesitated. It's nothing, really. I just wanted to let you know that the transfer to the branch as general manager was something I requested from headquarters. I didn't have the chance to inform you beforehand. He paused again. And as for Alice coming with me, that was the CEO's decision, not mine. I kept my expression calm, but something was off. He had never been this deferential. This was a decision from headquarters, Mr. Brooks, I said coolly. There's no need to inform me. If there's nothing else, I'll be going now. Suddenly, he grabbed my wrist, his grip tight, frustrated. I've explained everything patiently to you. What else do you want? In the past, his lowly apology would have moved me to tears, made me believe he was the best man in the world. But now, my heart was numb. I wouldn't be moved by such cheap theatrics. I didn't yell. I didn't struggle. I just looked at him, calmly. And just like that, Samuel, like a deflated balloon, let go. His enthusiasm completely drained. He sighed deeply, looking helpless. I admit I didn't tell you the whole truth that night. I was drunk, but I didn't stay at Alice's place because I wanted to. She suddenly had a stomach ache, and I didn't feel right leaving her alone, so I stayed to look after her. I only said that to avoid making you overthink things. As for my transfer to the branch office, it's only because I wanted to have more time to spend with you. Grace, when did things become like this between us? Silence. The air was thick, heavy, stretching on forever. Samuel seemed to remember something, pulling a small, delicate box from his drawer. Here. You mentioned this was beautiful a while ago. Cartier's latest diamond necklace. He'd always hated me wearing jewelry, calling it flashy. Now this? I had no intention of accepting it. Some things are only desirable at a certain moment. Once that moment passes, they lose all their appeal. Just then, Alice walked in. Seeing the situation, she feigned an apology. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a file waiting FO. Our Mr. Brooks to sign. I turned my face away as she placed the file on his desk. Oh, is this the new Cartier necklace? I've been wanting one for so long. Alice's words made me freeze. I quickly grabbed the box, handed it to her. If you like it, it's yours. The moment Alice took it, Samuel snatched it back, his voice frighteningly cold. It's not for you. I watched Alice's joyful expression crumble into shock. I didn't pay attention to their argument. I just smiled, a small, sad smile, and walked out. That evening I moved into the small apartment I'd bought a while ago. It wasn't Samuel's luxurious house, but it was mine. My space, my home, with only my traces. And closer to work, a bonus. After 3 years of marriage, suddenly returning to single life felt strange, yet liberating. Before, I'd wake early, make his breakfast, choose his clothes, his tie. Rush home to cook dinner. Spend sleepless nights worrying about him and Alice. Now? None of that. My time was mine. A lightness settled over me. I worried Samuel, persistent as he was, would come bothering me. But I was overthinking it. He didn't ask about me. We'd cross paths at the office, a polite nod, no words. It was fine. Neither of us interfering. A month blurred by. I poured my newfound freedom into work. Looking at the figures, my performance had doubled. Men, it seemed, only held me back. I even admired myself for not caving, for not seeking reconciliation. I, Grace, could be self-centered too. I didn't have to be anyone's doormat. Monday morning, our weekly meeting. My usual spot was the first seat, right of the general manager. But today, Alice was sitting there. I paused, irritated, and sat next to her. Everyone in the room noticed. She was a junior secretary, not even supposed to be in the meeting, let alone in my seat. In the past, secretaries just set up the room. What had gotten into Alice? Samuel glanced at her, said nothing. A silent approval. Normally, after Samuel introduced the topic, I'd report first. But this time, after he spoke, Alice, from my seat, launched into a long report about Samuel's schedule, the number of contracts he'd signed. The whole room was shocked. Since when was this part of our report? By the time it was my turn, I couldn't hide my displeasure. Samuel wasn't pleased either, though he kept it in check. After the meeting, Samuel waited. Grace, stay behind. I need to talk to you. He closed the door. Before I could process it, he had pushed me against the wall. Are you ever going to stop? I glared at him. What did Mr. Brooks mean by that? Samuel was seething, his chest heaving, glaring through clenched teeth. You know exactly what I meant. You moved out without a word, ignored me for over a month, and yet you're still not done. A cold laugh bubbled up. I thought he was lost in Alice's warmth, forgotten me entirely. I was wrong. He had been counting the days, waiting for me to beg. I stared at him, cold. Samuel, I said, breaking the silence. Let's divorce. He looked at me in disbelief. What did you say? I said, let's divorce. I'm willing to let you be with Alice. Suddenly, Samuel snapped. He grabbed my neck with both hands, his breath hot and furious in my ear. Is it because of those rumors you're going to divorce me? Grace, are you out of your mind? I won't agree to this. His grip was tight. I coughed violently, struggling for air. It wasn't until someone knocked, wanting to clean, that he finally, reluctantly, released me. I gasped, breathing heavily. Back at my desk, the memory of his rage still shook me. From that day forward, Samuel insisted on driving me home every evening. He loudly declared to the whole office that I was his wife. At first, I tried to avoid him, turning him down, but he'd push the rideshare drivers away, making me feel embarrassed and helpless. After a few days, I gave in. He begged me repeatedly to move back in, but I remained firm. The home we'd shared, once so full of beautiful memories, now held only scars. Those happy moments, gone, never to be reclaimed. The day Samuel made his announcement, Alice confronted him, causing a huge scene, then took a week off. As for Samuel, he began an extravagant campaign to win me back, treating me with an exaggerated attentiveness. Picking me up, dropping me off, buying my favorite breakfast, delivering afternoon tea and fresh fruit to my desk. On weekends he'd come over and cook. And I had to admit, his cooking was surprisingly good. But my heart felt nothing. It all seemed like an act, a performance. I was numb. A week later, another Monday. We were in the meeting room, waiting for Samuel. But he didn't show. Alice wasn't there either. A twinge of confusion. Back at my desk, curiosity got the better of me. I called him. His voice was hoarse, tired. Mr. Brooks, you missed the meeting. Are you coming later? A pause. Then, softer, almost defeated. Is work all you care about? Can't you show some concern for me? Oh, are you unwell? Over the phone, he coughed. My lungs aren't feeling right. I think I might have pneumonia. I just ordered some medicine online. Could you come over after work to keep me company? I hesitated. We'll see. If it gets worse, go to the hospital. Don't wait too long, he urged. After work, I had no intention of going. But he called again. His pneumonia seemed to have worsened, he said, asking me to take him to the hospital. Fine. I decided to go. Even if we weren't a couple, it felt right to help a colleague. When I rang the doorbell, Samuel quickly opened the door, looking nothing like someone sick. Inside, the dining table was laid out, lavish dinner, wine, roses. He saw my surprise, hurried to pull out a chair. I told you I'd make up for our anniversary. Please, Mrs. Brooks, allow me the honor. He was dressed in a suit and bow tie, quite sharp. Honestly, in that moment, I felt a flicker of emotion, but it was fleeting. 2 months ago, it might have been different. Now, it was too late. I sighed inwardly but didn't refuse. We ate quietly, sipped wine, but Samuel's mood was anything but calm. He looked deeply into my eyes, then suddenly, with rapid breaths, pulled me into his arms, onto the sofa. I didn't understand why, but my body reacted in a way I hadn't expected. Maybe the alcohol, maybe the ghost of a connection we once shared. But just as I was on the verge of losing control, I felt something strange under the cushion. A thong. And it wasn't mine. Instantly, the heat between us was doused with cold water. We both froze. The alcohol wore off in an instant. Samuel's face went pale. He nervously started explaining. Grace, no, it's not what you think. This thong is just. Save your explanation. You can have your fun. Slowly, calmly, I straightened my clothes, then stuffed the thong into his collar. I took a taxi home that night, and as I did, I realized I had finally given up. His calls flooded in, but I turned off my phone, pulled the blanket over my head, and fell into an exhausted sleep. From that moment, I completely cut off all communication, except for work. If he tried to drag me into his car, I'd call the police. If he showed up at my door, same thing. Samuel, scared by my resolve, finally stopped pestering me. Alice returned to work too. Our relationship became strictly professional. I didn't know if he and Alice still kept in touch after hours, but they were definitely more restrained at the office. Time passed. About a month later. A university classmate, Henry, who'd been abroad for years, announced he was returning. Henry quickly organized a reunion and invited me. We were in the same city, had a good relationship, met for meals occasionally. I casually checked, either Samuel nor Alice would be there. So I decided to go. That evening, I wore a sleek black evening dress, did my makeup carefully. But operational data issues made me late. Approaching the private room, I heard loud voices. I walked toward the slightly ajar door, intending to find a quiet corner. But when I reached the doorway, the scene inside froze me. Alice, in a form-fitting dress, fishnet stockings, was sitting on Samuel's lap. Her arms wrapped around his neck. They were locked in a passionate kiss. Below them, a group of classmates cheered, clapping, chanting, "Kiss! Kiss!" Both were obviously drunk. Alice puckered her lips again, about to kiss him. My sudden appearance froze everyone. My classmates knew about the complicated relationship between Samuel, Alice, and me. But they also knew I was Samuel's legally wedded wife. Samuel and Alice snapped to attention, suddenly sober. Samuel tried to pull Alice off him, but she pretended to be more intoxicated, clinging tightly. Her eyes, full of defiance, stared at me. Henry, our class president, felt the awkwardness, quickly stood up. "Grace, you're finally here. You're so late, we thought you weren't coming." I smiled lightly. "Well, everyone who shouldn't be here is here. So how could I not show up?" With that, I walked up to them, took out my phone, and started recording. "Why not? Kiss. This free show? I'd like to see it too." Samuel froze, his face contorting in irritation as he tried to swipe my phone. "Are you crazy?" he snapped, then forcefully shoved Alice off his lap. I put my phone away and pouted. "Homage! What a buzzkill!" The party ended on a sour note. The returning classmate, now an awkward side character, apologized by drinking 3 shots, clearly embarrassed. When I got home, I turned off the lights and sat on the couch, crying my heart out. I started to reflect on these years of entanglement. Samuel and Alice had known each other since childhood. Not just lovers, but childhood sweethearts, first loves. I was the newcomer. Samuel came from wealth, a typical second-gen rich kid. My family, the Brooks, made their fortune from scratch. When I graduated, my father's company faced a financial crisis. They needed $100 million. Alice's family was too ordinary to help. At that time, I'd been in love with Samuel for 4 years, even confessed, only to be rejected. I'd told my father about my feelings. When Brooks faced trouble, Samuel's father was approached for funding. My father immediately suggested a marriage between our families. Samuel's father naturally agreed. Perhaps in our parents' eyes, business interests outweighed everything. Marriage, the feelings of the next generation, just sacrifices, negotiations. Right after I graduated, we got engaged. The night of our engagement, my father transferred $100 million into Brooks's account. A few months later, we were married. During this time, Samuel never showed resentment towards me. He didn't bring up Alice. His thoughts remained a mystery. Still, he was kind, a competent husband, ensuring I was respected as Mrs. Brooks in public. The changes started 2 years ago. Alice, who'd gone abroad after graduation, returned home earlier than expected. And from that moment, their relationship rekindled, spiraling completely out of control. At first, I confronted Samuel, demanding to know why he had lied. All I got was a cold, cruel response. He told me that even though we were married, he had never loved me. Our marriage, in his eyes, was merely a transaction. He only tolerated me as part of the deal, to avoid loss for either family. But Alice's return destroyed whatever restraint he had left. Alice, moreover, had come back with clear intentions. She directly applied to be his secretary. Always by his side. With that closeness, that familiarity, it was only a matter of time before things went wrong. At one point, I'd considered just holding on to the title of Mrs. Brooks, unwilling to let it go. As long as I didn't back down, Alice would always be the secret mistress. For 2 years, I endured countless hardships. But now, I was tired. If they were so eager for me to step aside, I would let them have it. But what confused me was why Samuel was still pretending. Even though I'd mentioned divorce, he still refused to agree. He kept trying, unwillingly, to salvage our relationship. Was he afraid a divorce would ruin the business interests between our families? If that was truly the case, then I had something I needed to discuss with him. That evening after work, I decided to visit Samuel in his office. "Let's have dinner together tonight. I've made a reservation at your favorite restaurant." I took a deep breath. Samuel, busy with work, looked up, surprised. His expression quickly changed to excitement. He snapped his laptop shut. "It's about time to leave anyway. Let's go now. I'll drive." At the restaurant, I ordered his favorite dishes. His mood seemed to lift as he dug into his meal, cutting his steak with a happy smile. He looked up. "So, have you finally calmed down?" he asked, his voice light, teasing. I quietly watched him. "Why won't you divorce me? Is it because you're worried about the impact on both our families' interests?" Samuel, who had been cutting his steak, froze. His expression instantly turned cold. "Are you asking me this because you called me out for dinner?" he shot back. "Yes, this is important to me. If it's because of this, I suggest we involve both our parents." Before I could finish, Samuel slammed his knife and fork onto the table, cutting me off sharply. "Stop guessing. It's not about that. And don't bring it up again." I was startled by his outburst, unsure why he was so sensitive. As I sat there, unsure how to respond, a phone call interrupted the silence. Samuel immediately answered. "Yeah, I'm eating. What's wrong? Are you feeling worse? I'll come over right away." After he hung up, Samuel grabbed his coat and rushed out, not even sparing me a glance. A wave of frustration rose. He'd never acted this way. Even proud and domineering, he would never have treated me like this in public. I guessed the call was from Alice. I paid the bill and followed him in a cab. To my surprise, he didn't drive to Alice's house. Instead, he went to a high-end private hospital. Curiosity got the better of me. I followed him inside. Was Samuel sick? He walked into the gynecology and obstetrics department, pushing open the door to an examination room. My heart sank. Why here? Was Alice pregnant? I hurried after a doctor who had just walked in ahead of him, standing just outside the door. Through the gap, I saw Alice leaning against Samuel. The doctor was handing Samuel a medical report. I was about to eavesdrop. But just as I was about to listen, the doctor suddenly stood up and closed the door. I froze, shocked, but relieved they hadn't seen me. I quickly slipped away, unnoticed. Standing at the hospital entrance, a fire of rage surged inside me. Those two. How dare they? Behind my back, they'd gone as far as getting her pregnant. And yet, he still wouldn't divorce me. What on earth was he dragging me through this for? From that day forward, Samuel and I were reduced to nothing more than colleagues, strictly business. Meanwhile, Samuel and Alice's time off became more frequent, often at the same time. It made sense. Alice was pregnant. Of course, Samuel would be involved in every doctor's appointment and checkup. Many colleagues noticed their strange behavior, especially with the already obvious tension. I often heard whispers of gossip, though they were careful to speak behind my back. One morning, the elevator door slid open. I found myself face to face with Alice. It had been days since I'd seen her. She'd taken time off. She stood in a white dress that clung to her slim frame. Her pale skin almost ethereal under the fluorescent lights. She looked more fragile than I remembered. Always slender, but now even thinner. I couldn't help but wonder if she had just recently become pregnant. No visible bump yet, too early to show, I guessed. As soon as she saw me, her body stiffened. She turned away abruptly, sneering, a clear air of disdain. The fury that had simmered in my chest for weeks, since I found out, flared up. Without thinking, I shot her a mocking smile, locking eyes. "What's with the sneer?" I asked, my voice sharp. "Are you enjoying being the other woman, pregnant by a married man? Does that make you proud?" Alice's face twisted with disgust. Her eyes flashed with irritation. "Are you crazy? When did I ever get pregnant by a married man?" I couldn't contain my bitterness any longer. "So you can do it, but not admit it?" I retorted with a cold laugh. "Go ahead, tell me. I'll even help you out." I saw the fury rising in her eyes. Without warning, Alice raised her arm to shove me. But I was faster. I grabbed her arm, and with force flung her aside. Just then, the elevator doors opened. Alice stumbled backward, crashing into the hallway. My heart skipped a beat. Before I could react, I rushed forward to catch her. But then, as if on cue, Samuel appeared. He grabbed Alice with surprising speed, pulling her into his arms. For a split second, I thought everything would be okay, that he might help her. But instead, he freed one hand and slapped me across the face with a resounding crack. The sting burned across my cheek. My mind went numb with shock and anger. "Grace, you're out of your mind!" Samuel shouted, his voice filled with disbelief and rage. "Alice is in a weak condition, and you still dare to push her!" I stood there, holding my cheek, my blood boiling. The anger I'd kept bottled up finally erupted. I pointed a trembling finger at Samuel. "Do you have no shame? You got your mistress pregnant and still have the nerve to defend her in front of me?" Samuel's face froze, twisted with confusion and disbelief. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice shaking with incredulity. "I got whose belly big? Are you talking about Alice? You're insane. This is all in your head." I opened my mouth to tell him about the hospital visit, how I'd seen Alice there, so far along. But before I could speak, footsteps echoed. Employees began trickling in, their murmurs growing louder. The sight of the boss and executives arguing in the middle of the office entrance. It was disruptive, uncomfortable. I quickly bit my lip, feeling the weight of all those eyes on us. Without another word, I sidestepped Samuel and Alice, my chest tight with pain, and made my way to my desk. Sitting down, I couldn't shake the suffocating feeling. My heart was heavy, the confusion gnawing at me. If they were so in love, if Alice was really carrying his child, why couldn't they just let me go? Why did they need to rub it in my face? Was Samuel deliberately trying to humiliate me? Was this his cruel way of making me watch as his child was born with his mistress by his side? The questions swirled unanswered. As I sank deeper into the hurt, the next morning, I made up my mind. The decision felt like a weight lifting, yet also like stepping into uncharted territory. I couldn't let Samuel or his indifference tether me any longer. I prepared the divorce agreement with deliberate precision, my fingers moving mechanically over the papers as I drafted the final terms. Once done, I placed it on Samuel's desk, an unspoken challenge in the form of a neatly signed document. I stood there, breathing in the cold, sterile air of his office, trying to steady my nerves. I had no illusions about the battle ahead. If he found another excuse to avoid divorce, I wouldn't let him. I was ready to fight for my freedom, to claim what was rightfully mine, my life. But to my surprise, Samuel didn't hesitate. He glanced at the papers briefly, signed without a word, and slid the pen back across the desk. The divorce was finalized the very next day. It was over. I could hardly believe how smoothly it had gone. But the relief was short-lived. As the weight of what had just happened sank in, I realized just how suffocating my life had been in that house, with those two people who had become so repulsive to me. The thought of wasting any more time with them was unbearable. I was done. Months ago, a competitor company had approached me, offering the general manager position for one of their branches. The catch, it was in another city, far from everything I knew, and far from Samuel. At the time, I hesitated. Would he approve? Would he stand in my way? But now, with everything that had happened, I no longer cared. Without thinking twice, I quickly sent them an email inquiring about the position. Deep down, I didn't expect much. I had no idea if they had already filled the role. To my surprise, they responded almost immediately. The next day, they flew to meet me for an interview. Their enthusiasm was unmistakable. The meeting was a whirlwind. Within hours, they made me an offer, start immediately. Everything moved so fast. My head was spinning, but there was no time for hesitation. I needed to get out. I knew I couldn't resign in person. Samuel would never let it go without some sort of scene. So I sent him an email. I called him afterward just to confirm. When he answered, there was a long pause, as though the sound of my voice had caught him off guard. Then, without emotion, he muttered. The indifference in his voice was almost suffocating. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a response. Instead, I focused on the future I was about to create for myself. In Shanghai, I quickly set up the new branch. My career took off in ways I had never imagined. The company that hired me was in the same industry as Samuel's, and the bitterness that had been simmering inside me for so long found its outlet in the competition. I made things difficult for him, targeting his resources, always striving to outdo him. Each success felt like a small revenge for the years I had spent sacrificing my own happiness. When I heard Samuel's business had dropped nearly in half over the last 6 months, a part of the frustration I'd been holding finally began to ease. It wasn't that I enjoyed his failure, but it was a reminder that I was no longer bound by his presence, no longer dependent on his approval. It had been half a year since we had any personal contact. I had no idea what was going on with that couple. I assumed my life would never cross paths with them again. Alice was probably about to give birth by now, I thought. My new life had nothing to do with them. Then, on the eve of the new year, everything changed. I had come back home to celebrate, looking forward to the peace and quiet of my own space. But when I opened the door, there he was, Samuel, standing on my doorstep. I froze, staring at him as a cold wave of disbelief washed over me. What was he doing here? I didn't move. I didn't want him to step inside. Mr. Brooks, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. Here to wish me a happy new year? There's no need. I'm not accepting guests. My words were as cold as the air that rushed in from outside. Samuel's face was worn, tired, like someone who had been carrying a heavy burden for far too long. He stared at me, trying to find the right words, but there was nothing in his eyes, just an overwhelming sense of loss, or maybe regret. After a long moment of silence, I broke it. Oh, by the way, I should congratulate you. You married Alice, didn't you? And became a father. Right. I couldn't stop myself. The words came out almost spitefully, coated in the bitterness I'd been holding for months. I watched as his face drained of color. His breathing grew ragged, as if my words had physically struck him. The tension in the air thickened. I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of satisfaction, a small sense of justice. I stared at him, confused. What's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? I asked, my voice tinged with mock concern. Samuel's eyes were filled with deep sorrow and regret, a sadness that seemed to weigh down every word he spoke. Grace! His voice cracked slightly, as if the burden of what he was about to say had been too heavy. That's not the case. Alice, she passed away 2 months ago. It was advanced cervical cancer. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to grasp the truth. The world seemed to blur, the office fading into the background as I struggled to process the impossible. What? What did you say? Alice is dead? My voice came out disbelieving, barely a whisper. When did she get cervical cancer? Samuel's face was a mask of pain, his eyes downcast as though the very mention of her name pained him. He hesitated, as if the weight of the confession took him to a place he didn't want to revisit. Finally, he spoke, his voice thick with emotion. Last year, on our 3rd anniversary, he began, his words carefully measured. Actually, I never told you the truth. That night, I wasn't drunk, and it wasn't because she had stomach pains and asked me to stay. The truth is, that night, she found out she had late-stage cervical cancer. A strange, nauseating guilt rose in my chest. My stomach churned. I wanted to say something, anything, but my mouth was dry. The words wouldn't come. Why didn't you just tell me? I asked, my voice shaking slightly, betraying the tremor I felt deep inside. The question felt heavier than I expected. All the years of confusion and hurt converging. Samuel let out a bitter laugh, hollow, almost hopeless, echoing in the silence. His eyes, so full of regret and sorrow, looked at me with a quiet, resigned finality. But there was something else there, too. A fatigue, as though the burden of keeping this secret had worn him down to exhaustion. Alice didn't want me to tell you, he said, barely a whisper, the sadness thick in his voice. She said that her last wish before she died was for me to be by her side as her boyfriend. She didn't want my selfish actions to cause us to divorce, and she genuinely hoped we could stay out of each other's way quietly, without drawing attention. But you know, it's impossible to hide something like that for long. The air between us felt thick, charged with the weight of unsaid words. And yet, all I could feel was confusion, disbelief. I swallowed hard, the knot in my throat tightening, before forcing out the next question, the one that had gnawed at me for so long. I know you probably thought that before I divorced you, Alice was carrying my child, I said, the words tasting bitter, and that I was following her to the maternity ward. But the truth is, I was with her for her cervical cancer checkups, not for a pregnancy test. The truth of those words hit me like a wave. I struggled to stay upright. I could see the subtle shift in Samuel's expression, the flicker of pain and sympathy as he leaned forward slightly, bracing himself. You can't blame her for always being hostile towards you, he said, his voice soft, tinged with sadness. After all, she loved me for so many years. There was a distant look in his eyes, as if remembering something long gone. A time now so far removed from our reality. But now everything is in the past, and I don't want to dwell on it anymore. I just hope you can let go of your feelings and move on. His words hung in the air, heavy with finality. I could see the sincerity, but there was something else too, a quiet plea, asking for forgiveness. I wanted to tell him I was still hurt, that I couldn't just move on so easily. But the words stuck in my throat, caught between the past and present, between everything I thought I knew and the truth he just laid before me. His words hung like a dense fog, thick and suffocating, leaving me uncertain. I stared at him, my gaze searching his eyes. Those once warm eyes, now clouded with remorse and something deeper, almost apology. It was strange, unsettling, but for a fleeting moment, I felt something stir. Not forgiveness, no, but something akin to understanding. It was there and gone in an instant. A brief flicker of emotion I quickly pushed aside. So, you specifically came to see me today to clear up this misunderstanding? I asked, my voice quieter now, almost hesitant, betraying a hint of vulnerability. The question lingered, an unanswered prayer. Samuel's lips curled into what could only be described as a reluctant smile, strained, tired, as if the effort to express anything positive was too much. It's not just about that. His words faltered. For a moment, his eyes dropped, avoiding mine, before he met my gaze again. There was something raw in his expression, unguarded. I also wanted to ask if we could remarry. My parents have been scolding me for a year now, he added, his voice laced with frustration, tinged with an exhaustion I hadn't heard in so long. It caught me off guard. A stab of emotion I wasn't prepared for. The weight of his request hung like a heavy stone, pressing down on my chest. A cold shiver raced down my spine as memories of the divorce resurfaced. The devastation, the lies, the deceit. The sharp ache of that final goodbye had never fully faded. And now he was asking for a second chance at something that could never be repaired. I couldn't stop myself. The question slipped out. Didn't you say that Alice didn't want you to divorce me because of her selfishness? Why did you agree to the divorce later? The words were out, and the room seemed to contract. The air suddenly too thick to breathe. Samuel froze, his eyes locking onto mine. For a heartbeat he didn't speak. His face was unreadable, the silence stretching. Before he finally opened his mouth, his voice low, barely a whisper, as though confessing something far too painful. To be honest, don't blame me for this. But at that time, I really did think about burning all bridges. I thought maybe I could gather the courage to end things with you once and for all. After all, as you know, our marriage was just a transaction. I wanted to make it up to Alice before she passed. I wanted to give her the wedding of her dreams. His words hung heavy with regret. He sighed deeply, his shoulders slumped, as though the weight of his own admission had crushed him. His vulnerability was exposed in a way I hadn't seen before. That was my decision, and it had nothing to do with Alice. As his words sank in, something within me shifted. A strange sense of relief washed over me, as though the weight I had been carrying had lightened, even if only by a fraction. It was almost like the final piece of a puzzle falling into place. I exhaled slowly, the tension in my chest easing just a little. I spoke, my voice steady, but there was a quiet finality to it. Well then, I wish you well. You fulfilled the last wish of the woman you loved. Samuel's gaze held mine for a moment longer, but there was something in his eyes that unsettled me. A lingering emotion, something I couldn't quite place. A flicker of uncertainty or perhaps regret. It unsettled me, leaving me wondering if he had truly come to terms with everything. Then, after a long silence, he spoke again, his voice heavy. "But the reason I came today," he began, slow and deliberate, "is that I want to remarry you." I froze. The words hit me like a slap. I couldn't move. I stared at him, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what he had just said. Confusion and disbelief bubbled up, an overwhelming flood of emotions. "Samuel," I stammered, the words coming out before I could stop them. "You really caught me off guard. You said you needed to gather the courage to leave me. Since we're already divorced, why would you want to remarry? I know you don't love me." A shift seemed to happen in his expression. His eyes, steady just a moment ago, suddenly turned red, the color deepening as if something inside him cracked. "Because after Alice died, I realized I had fallen in love with you." His voice was raw, tinged with a vulnerability I hadn't expected. I blinked, feeling the air thicken with his words, but the shock hadn't quite settled. "Then, would you be willing to accept me again and try to start over?" His voice softened, almost pleading, as he reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Without hesitation, he dropped to one knee in front of me, holding out a diamond ring. The light caught its facets, making it sparkle like some cruel illusion. For a moment my breath caught. His sincerity, the look in his eyes, almost convinced me. I could feel my resolve wavering, like a fragile thread pulled too tightly. But then, in the silence, reality seeped in, and the confusion began to clear. I stood there, gathering my thoughts, my heartbeat steady with a calm I didn't expect. I met his eyes and shook my head slowly. "I'm sorry. I can't accept," I said, my voice clear, even if it quivered slightly at the edges. Samuel looked up at me, his face etched with disbelief. "Why? Don't you love me anymore?" A bitter smile tugged at my lips. I let out a small, almost empty laugh. "Samuel, from the time you reluctantly agreed to marry me to our entire marriage, you've been acting. You've played the role so well that I almost believed it myself. But you can't fool your eyes. There's never been any love for me in them. Haven't you noticed?" I paused, watching his face shift with each word. "Every time we look at each other, your gaze is unfocused, like you're somewhere else entirely. But I've seen the way you look at Alice. It's different. It's intense, passionate, and deep, as if you want to see straight into her soul. And that's the truth of it, Samuel." His breath hitched slightly. For a second, I saw something flicker in his eyes, but I wasn't done. I had to say it all. "And you and Alice, don't try to deny it. You didn't just start your relationship a year ago when she was diagnosed with cervical cancer. You've been involved since you were teenagers. And when she came back to the country 2 years ago, that's when everything reignited. Your feelings for her didn't begin when she was sick. They never truly went away." I took a small step back, my heart steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside. "And now what you call suddenly realizing you love me is nothing more than a habit. You've gotten used to having me around these past few years. Now that Alice is gone, you're just feeling empty without me, right? You miss the familiarity, but it's not love." Samuel's face had gone pale, his confusion turning into something darker, his expression shifting rapidly, his mind clearly racing to process everything. "So, you think I never really loved you?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I let out a bitter laugh, a small chuckle that carried no joy. "Yes, Samuel, you never loved me from the start, and you never will. What you feel now is just a lingering memory of habit combined with the pressure from your parents who have never let you breathe. But I don't want to go into it any further. Take care of yourself, and please don't come looking for me again." My voice was calm, but my heart was heavy. Each word a slow, painful release. With that I turned, and without looking back, I closed the door softly behind me. Not all love can be rekindled. Some things are better left in the past, where they belong. After the new year, I boarded a flight to Ocean City, feeling a mixture of excitement and anticipation as the plane ascended. The hum of the engine became a steady backdrop to the whirlwind of thoughts racing through my mind. My career was about to take a fresh start, and with it, I was ready to leave behind the weight of the past. Life, after all, isn't just about love. There are so many other things worth pursuing, so many other dreams to chase. The air in Ocean City felt different, brisk, filled with the promise of new beginnings. The year passed in a blur of work and growth. Then I heard the unexpected news. Samuel, of all people, had entered a monastery. The news hit me like a sharp breath, surprising and strangely distant. His branch office, once bustling, was now left without a leader, and the company was in disarray. Part of me wondered what had driven him to such a drastic change, but I quickly pushed the thought aside. His choices no longer affected my life, not in the way they once did. I reported this development to my company's headquarters, and within days they decided to acquire Samuel's company. I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction as I watched the wheels of corporate strategy turn, knowing I had played my part in this shift. The acquisition was swift, and soon the leadership of Samuel's once thriving office was handed over to someone new, someone from my company. Thanks to my performance and the rapid growth I'd helped cultivate, I was promoted. The offer to transfer to the group headquarters came as a surprise, but it was a welcome one. The promotion to vice president was a clear acknowledgement of my hard work and dedication. It was a moment of triumph. But not just for the title or the prestige. What mattered was that it marked the beginning of a new chapter. As I settled into my new role at headquarters, the transition was both exciting and overwhelming. The office, perched on the 25th floor of a sleek glass building, offered a stunning panoramic view of the city skyline. I would often pause at the window, gazing out at the bustling streets below, lost in thought. The pulse of the city was both a reminder of the world I was now a part of and a quiet reassurance that I had taken the right path. Days turned into weeks, and while the work was demanding, there was a sense of fulfillment in every project I oversaw. The headquarters was a hive of activity, the air thick with the energy of people pushing themselves to meet deadlines, brainstorm new ideas, or negotiate important deals. My team was talented, and for the first time, I felt truly valued for my abilities. One late afternoon, as I sifted through a stack of reports, my phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at the screen and froze. It was a message from Samuel. "Grace, can we talk?" My fingers hovered, my heart racing. I hadn't heard from him in months, and the last thing I expected was for him to reach out now. After everything. A mixture of frustration and curiosity flooded over me. Why now? Why, after all this time? When everything in my life was finally starting to come together. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity, torn between wanting to hear him out and the painful memories that resurfaced every time I thought of him. Finally, I exhaled deeply, placed my phone back down, and forced myself to focus on the tasks at hand. But the thoughts lingered like an unwelcome shadow. I had worked so hard to put him and the past behind me, to carve out a future that didn't revolve around his mistakes and lies. The idea of him somehow showing up again felt like a disruption to the delicate balance I had so carefully built. The next morning, my assistant knocked on my door. Her expression a little too serious. "Grace, there's a Mr. Brooks here to see you. He says it's urgent." A chill swept over me. My gut clenched. Samuel was standing in front of my office door. I hadn't seen him in person for months, but the familiar, almost magnetic pull I had once felt toward him was gone. What remained was a faint echo, a ghost of what had been. He looked different, tired, older perhaps, with shadows under his eyes and a few more lines on his face, as though time had finally caught up with him. "Grace," he said softly as I stepped into the doorway, his voice carrying a note of vulnerability I hadn't heard before. "I know you probably don't want to see me, and I wouldn't blame you, but I need to apologize for everything." His words hung in the air. For a moment, I could hear nothing but the rush of blood in my ears. I swallowed hard, trying to suppress the conflicting emotions that swirled inside me. Anger, resentment, and a strange aching sadness all battled for dominance. "Samuel," I finally said, my voice steady but cold. "You have no idea what you put me through. No apology will undo that. You had your chance." He took a step closer, as if my words hadn't quite reached him. His eyes searched mine, desperate for some sign that there was still a possibility of reconciliation. "I know I hurt you," he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "But I've changed. Grace, I'm not the same person anymore. What happened with Alice? It was a mistake." I was confused, and I lost sight of what really mattered. I took a deep breath, my heart racing. He was still the same, still trying to make me believe his words could fix everything. But the truth was, I wasn't the same person I had been with him. I was stronger now, more independent, and most importantly, I had learned to rely on myself, not him. I'm glad you found clarity, Samuel, I said quietly, meeting his gaze. But my life has moved on. I've moved on. I could see the hurt in his eyes, but there was no turning back now. The woman who had once clung to him in desperation, waiting for him to choose her, was long gone. In her place was someone who understood that life, with all its twists and turns, could be beautiful even without him. With one last lingering look, Samuel turned and walked away, disappearing into the elevator as I stood there, my heart heavy with a mix of relief and regret. The rest of the day passed in a blur. My thoughts kept drifting back to that moment. But as the hours went by, I felt the weight of it lift. I had made peace with my past. Samuel's appearance had only confirmed that he was a chapter 1 had closed long ago. And no matter how hard he tried to open it again, the story had already been written. As I sat at my desk later that evening, gazing out at the city lights twinkling below, I realized that the future was finally mine. And for the first time in a long time, I was content with the direction it was taking.